The Skylab vehicle was built from an S4B stage that came from the lunar program. The S4B stage being the third stage that when you got into Earth orbit and began translunar injection, it was the S4B stage that launched you off toward the moon. This part up here is the hydrogen tank, and this tank down below is the oxygen tank. They took the hydrogen tank and they put one extra floor in it, a deck, and a deck down here at the bottom. And this became, you might call this the living area. This lower deck was the area where the wardroom, the waste management, or the bathroom, and our bedrooms was located, plus some of the exercise equipment. On the upper area here, quite a bit of storage and quite a few more experiments. The solar and anti-solar airlocks were located on this level. The airlocks being windows in the side of the spacecraft with double doors that allowed us to open the inside door, attach an experiment to that door, and then open the outside door and thrust the experiment out into space on a pole and gather information. Well, if you go back one, Dave, you'll probably remember that when Skylab was launched in May of 1973, that as it was lifting off of the pad, we had a lot of vibration going on there, and a lot of the latches that were to hold the micrometeoroid shield in tight against the vehicle began to loosen a bit. As the vehicle climbed up on its trajectory, the pressure inside of the meteoroid shield was not, the vents weren't large enough for it to relieve properly, and so there was pressure on the inside, and eventually one side, which turned out to be the solar side of the Skylab vehicle, lost its micrometeoroid shield. It was torn away by the slipstream of the atmosphere as it went up. Also, as you can see, one wing is missing here, and that was lost as well due to the vibration, causing it to unlatch and deploy itself and then be torn away by the slipstream of the launch. So when this vehicle arrived in orbit, only about 12 minutes after launch, we began to get information on the ground that things were not all very well. This area here was, this awning here did not exist at that time. This area here was where the skin had been torn away. And so we had really just the bare skin of the vehicle there. The temperature inside the vehicle began to grow. It got up to be about 130 degrees Fahrenheit. And it became clear that it was going to be uninhabitable unless we could do something about it. And so a tribute to the ingenuity of people, in 10 days, they managed to design a system that would shade it. And it turned out to be a big rectangular-shaped parasol. And we had to sacrifice the solar airlock in order to deploy this thing, which meant there would never be any science possible out of that airlock. But basically, we opened the window, stuck a parasol out the window and opened it, and then pulled it back up against the side of the spacecraft. And the parasol is, you can see a corner of it there and a corner of it there. It sits right underneath there. And that brought the temperature from the very high temperatures down to about the mid to high 80 range for the first crew to finally get in and be able to live on it. So Pete Conrad and his crew, they did the fix-it work. They saved the vehicle for us and went ahead and did their 28-day mission. They came down 30 days later. Alan Bean and his crew went up, and they brought with them what we call a two-pole awning or sail, and so we have another awning laid over the top of the parasol in order to cover up some of these corners here and here that were causing heat leaks and still keeping the spacecraft a little hotter than we would like to have it. And this was deployed by Alan Bean's crew. So this is what it looked like when we arrived, and actually this picture was taken when we left, but this is exactly what it looked like when we arrived on Skylab 4 on November 16th of 1973. The main missions of Skylab were, number one, the study of the human body, but there were two other missions as well that were equally as important. The second mission was the study of the sun, solar physics. The spacecraft itself had a large windmill-shaped set of solar panels and a large module there, which is referred to as the ATM, the Apollo Telescope Mount. You can think of it as a naval gun turret. Inside that funny box was what was like a turret, or this is it right up here, much like the revolver, or the turret of a revolver. And each one of the holes in the revolver were a telescope used to study the sun. This information was all gathered here and then transmitted down into the multiple docking adapter to the control panel. Ed Gibson was the solar physicist on our mission. He was also our mission doctor. Dr. Gibson was in charge of taking blood samples and looking at them through the microscope and counting the white blood cells and the red blood cells and that sort of thing. He dispensed drugs as necessary for sore throats and fungus and things like that. Only problem is Dr. Gibson's degree is in mechanical engineering. But he was the only doctor on the mission, so he got to be the quack. The third main mission of Skylab was to study the Earth, to look down at the Earth and gather information that would be useful to Earth scientists. And a lot of the equipment used to study the Earth was on the opposite side of the multiple docking adapter from the Apollo telescope mount. So when it was time to do an Earth resources pass, the spacecraft was going around the Earth like this, calling that the sun. The spacecraft was always in what we called solar inertial. But when it became time to do a study of the Earth, we would begin modifying our attitude control system so the spacecraft would go around the Earth this way, what we call local vertical, local horizontal, and in order to keep its belly to the Earth so that we could gather the data. We were good for about one orbit or 1.5 orbits at that in that attitude, and then we had to straighten it out and get back into solar inertial again in order to begin to unload the control moment gyros that were used to stabilize the vehicle. That's pretty much an overview. Again, we had 3 missions: the human body, the Earth, and the sun. And we had an extra bonus mission, and that was the comet Kohoutek was discovered in February of '76. It was determined that it had a period of about 2,000 years and would cross perihelion, the closest point of approach to the sun, on about Christmas Day. And so we were to have a grand stand view from our vehicle of the comet Kohoutek, and Ed will talk a little bit about how that all worked out. So with that, let me turn it over to Ed now to talk a little bit about some of the more details in the mission.
Okay, thanks, Jerry. Jerry makes fun of my technical background, but in reality, I had a very long and distinguished background. I was president of my first grade class 2 years in a row. Also have to put this mission in perspective. We were up there for 84 days, and each of our flight logbooks was credited with over 2,000 hours of high-performance rocket time, and we slept through a third of it. Well, how many of you would like to fly in space? Oh, good. I like that enthusiasm. How many of you would like to sit on top of millions of pounds of explosives, controlled by millions of parts, each one coming from the lowest government bidder? Where are all the hands? Where'd they go? Okay, let's talk a little bit about what it's like to fly in space. Let's talk about liftoff. Liftoff is an exciting time, and any crewman who is not excited does not understand what's about to happen. The way I remember it is one crisp fall day, we got in a van with a few of our friends and took a ride out to a very tall building and climbed up took an elevator up to the top floor and went across to a little bridge and into another room where we had been many times before, laid down on a couch and stared at a very familiar scene. Did some technical work and talked with a few of our friends outside. Then after a few hours, one of our friends outside started counting backwards from 10. And then you hear this tremendous sucking sound as propellants get ripped into combustion chambers. It was a noise our crewmate Bill Pogue said it sounded like they just simultaneously flushed every toilet in the Astrodome. And then the bottom floor of the building explodes, and you're on your way. The first stage is a little rough. It's Jerry, you just said it earlier. It was like a train with square wheels. I felt when we were going through maximum aerodynamic pressure at about a minute into the flight and going through sonic, going through Mach 1, about 35,000 feet. That's where we hit the maximum aerodynamic pressure as well. You really get jolted around. And I felt that I was just like a fly glued to a paint shaker. You were just really felt insignificant compared to what was going on around you. Then staging is kind of like the great train wreck. You get bounced around quite a bit. And the booster unloads and you get thrown forward and back. And the second stage I remember is just like a long elevator ride, just very smooth and gradually accelerating. Until around 8.5 minutes into the flight, the engine cuts off and you're immediately in zero gravity, and this clean spacecraft you have is filled with dust and debris from the floor, which regardless of how careful you are at the Cape, it's always in there. Air conditioning equipment cleans that up real quick. And glance out the window, you can see the coast of Florida receding. Look back in for just seems like a few minutes and do a little bit of work on the instrument panel, and you look back out and there's the boot of Italy going by. And you know you're really hauling the mail. I mean, that really lets you know it's not a simulation. Well, let me back up one. Let me tell one story. Before liftoff, we found out who was really in charge of this mission. A few days before our intended liftoff, they discovered cracks in the fins of our booster. And now, because we were eager to go and not too happy with this 5-day delay required in order to replace the cracked fins, we started to refer to the booster as Old Humpty Dumpty. Well, somehow that got out in the press, and of course it didn't sit too well with those who were literally working around the clock in order to get the booster ready in time. But much to their credit, they said nothing. At least not until 20 minutes before launch, when we got a message: good luck and Godspeed from all the king's horses and all the king's men. Well, when you're thrust into orbit, you're literally thrust into a whole new environment. After a day, you feel sick, and when you look in the mirror, this pumpkin looks back, this round red head with bright red eyeballs. Because no longer checked by gravity, your arteries continue to ram the blood up towards the top of your head to try to keep the blood into your brain, but now without gravity, of course, it overcompensates. And it takes around 2 or 3 days before you lose enough water. You lose around 3 or 4 pounds of water, and then you feel good again. For Bill Pogue, it took him quite a bit longer, but I think he had something else going on besides fluid pressure. And that all felt pretty well after, at least I think Bill and I felt pretty good after the certainly the first week. And if you just move slowly in the first 2 or 3 days, you were okay. And after these few days of sickness and working hard to become efficient, life really becomes so easy and so effortless. And that's because one of the real problems, or one of the real stresses of spaceflight, is that there are none. Because without gravity to work against, your muscles will weaken, just like you would down here if you didn't work out, and your bones will also slowly weaken, just like a bedridden patient down here. But with the proper exercises, you can overcome that and be in pretty good shape when you come back, at least with muscles, not with the bones. Well, the harder you work, the more efficient and confident we became. The longer we were up there, the more you realize that there's nothing foreign and there's nothing hostile about space at all. It becomes familiar and then just plain downright comfortable. We came to think of our space station as just a 3-bedroom home. Maybe one perched on a mountaintop 300 miles high, but nonetheless a home. And I personally didn't feel like we were actually flying in space until we finally left it in our reentry vehicle. Remember, we climbed into the vehicle and all of a sudden felt just like going out to your garage and getting into a sports car and getting back on the road again. And I thought, hey, we really are flying. And it didn't feel like that way because that home was so stable. And I'm sure that's the way the current space station is. Well, let's see. I like if you heard the song Around the World in 80 Days? Well, we took 84 to go around the world. But we did go around 1,214 times. Now, the advantage of all that is that you get to know the Earth like the back of your hand. And that you would really enjoy. You get to look out, and I mentioned this, I think, a little last night. When you first get up there, like you see Italy going by, you recognize it because of the outline of the boot. You see Australia, you can start to recognize the contour. But after a while, you get to know the colors and patterns and textures of where you are. In that sense, you get to know the Earth just becomes very intimate, like the face of an old friend. You know where you are just by a small patch of what you're looking at. Cloud streets over Brazil were very prevalent at that time. Just long, sinuous streaks of clouds, and just a glance out and you can tell where you are a good part of the time. How many would like to go on a spacewalk? Well, let me see if I can talk you out of that one. Okay, let me give you an analogy. Let's go up to the top of a tall building. Maybe 100 stories high will do. And you look out the window and it's very pleasant and relaxing. You see the small little cars down there and you can't quite make out people. But it's not inhibiting in any way. But now let's open the window and we'll take you out to the end of a long springboard where we got a steel-fisted Arnold Schwarzenegger who's going to grab you by your ankles and hold you head down. Now intellectually you know you're never going to fall. And even though you're at the same height as you were inside, you got to admit it might feel a bit different. When on a spacewalk you get that same feeling, just a little bit more of it. You glide over Earth at a very serene 5 miles a second. And the laws of Sir Isaac Newton give you this full intellectual confidence that you're up there to stay. But when you look straight down on Earth and you feel or you see nothing else around you, this little voice comes out of nowhere. Suppose that Newton guy was just a little bit wrong. Anybody want to go? This is Bill Pogue and Jerry Carr. This is one of my proudest moments on Skylab because it was a real accomplishment when I figured we could get the commander to take out the trash. I don't know how it happened, Jerry, but I wasn't complaining. That was really a large area inside. And we can talk a little bit about sleeping and what it's like to live there. I don't know, Jerry, you hop in here anytime you want. Sleeping was a little interesting. I found you could go to sleep right away as long as you were tied down. We tried floating free and sleeping. If you go out in this large area, which is a little wider than this room, I think it was around 22 feet in diameter, and then try sleeping, you just relax and you think it'd be the ultimate. You never get a bed sore in zero gravity. You just relax and your arms come up just like you're in a swimming pool. And you start to go to sleep and you feel real comfortable, and then you slowly mash into a wall. And then your mind says, okay, it's over, now you can go to sleep. But then the other part of your mind says, but it's going to happen again. So you can never go to sleep that way, but I found if you just tie your arm down or anything, as long as you know you're stable, you could go to sleep. We actually had a good bed up there, which was against the wall, and it just had straps across us, and close your eyes and had a little pillow there to make you really think you're down here sleeping. If you ever got up in the middle of the night and we tried to sneak, you sneak over to the window and look out and you see China at high noon, that makes it a little difficult to sleep because you can't adjust yourself to thinking it's nighttime. Also, I remember trying to sneak over there, and we had a little controversy going with the ground, and if they knew we were up, they would try to give us something to do, or they'd give us hell for being up or whatever. So I tried to sneak over there without them knowing it, and I thought I had done it, but these guys could see on the rate gyros whether we were moving around. So I would push off from a wall real gingerly, and I could hear the guy down there, hey, they're up, they're up. So you never get away with it. We also went through the South Atlantic anomaly, which is a part in the over the South Atlantic where the Van Allen radiation belts dipped down a little bit. And our orbit with 270 miles was high enough that we just start to go through there, and there's high energy particles in there. And when you're just about to sleep, when those particles go through your eyeball, they'll scintillate the rods and cones, so it'll appear to you, to your brain, that you see flashes. And that was a little disconcerting at times. You can always know when you hit it. It wasn't very frequent. We had Bill Pogue had a real tough experiment to run. We hung him in the sack, and his job was to call out every time he saw a flash. So, and then you correlate that with the South Atlantic anomaly. And sure enough, you could see looked like a Gaussian curve, very beautiful, smooth curve that was centered right along the South Atlantic anomaly in terms of the frequency of those counts. So we knew what we were doing.
It was funny listening to Bill. He'd say, "There's a flash at 1 o'clock, flash at 4 o'clock, flash at 3, flash at 12." Flash at 11, flash at 9, another flash, flash. Then he would go flash at 12, flash at 3, flash at 1.
Well, in terms of recreation, what we enjoyed up there, most of it was just looking out the window. You never get tired of looking back at the Earth, whether it's for science or just the aesthetic beauty of it all. Reading was good to put you to sleep, but we also had something up there. Well, the engineers put it on board for us, and since this was a $2.5 billion program, we couldn't put anything frivolous up there, so they had something called the Dynamical Acceleration Reference Trajectory Studies, DARTS, darts. We had some Velcro darts up there. And I don't remember where you remember, Jer, but what surprised me was when you go through a dart in zero gravity, you think, boy, I'm gonna pin it right on Jerry, right on his chest there. So you throw that dart right at his chest, and it bounces off the ceiling. And that's because when you grow up, you get so used to throwing something with gravity, you don't throw it. You think you're throwing it there, but you're really throwing it up there. Your mind calculates how much you have to loft it, and you can't get over that. And there were so many things like that. You had to readjust yourself to zero gravity that you've learned in one gravity. And it often made me wonder, what if you grew up in zero gravity, and then you came down to gravity? That would really be a rude awakening. Someone says they got this floor down there or this wall down there they call a floor, and there's an invisible force that comes up and grabs you and holds you down, and you say, sure, what have you been drinking? You know what I mean? Gravity's a tough thing to picture if you've never felt it.
Well, I think probably the best thing would be for us to stop here and take questions and see if anybody would like to talk about anything special. Yes, sir.
You guys were professional astronauts. What do you make of the first space tourist who's paid $20 million for the pleasure of this week?
I wish I had a spacecraft, I would have taken them.
I personally didn't have a problem with that. I was hopeful that he would be accepted as a productive, useful member of the crew, would be allowed to work and help and be productive. Unfortunately, apparently that was not the case. But the man was a young man who was what we called a space cadet. He was in love with space all of his life. He worked hard. He was a very successful businessman, earned a lot of money, and decided what better way to spend my fortune than to do something that I desperately wanted to do all my life. Why not? So I have no problem with him doing that. I wish that he'd been given the opportunity to be a productive member of the crew.
I think it looks forward to the time when we will have a tourist station, which we should have. You ask, where do you cut it off then with the space station that we currently have? I was glad to see him go as well and felt just like Jerry. But it does point out that we really need to get the cost of access to space way down and put the equivalent of a Marriott hotel up there that people can go enjoy space and make it not just a frivolous exercise, but you can certainly make it educational as well as interesting and productive for a lot of people who want to go. And we've gotten to the point where that should be happening. And I look forward to the time when people can make money doing that, so that the free enterprise system will really get the cost of space access down.
Dave mentioned earlier on about shaving in space, and by the looks of your faces there, you didn't bother for 84 days. Why was that?
We had two ways to shave. One was with a regular safety razor with shaving cream, and the shaving cream was oily, and you couldn't wash it out of the razor. So if you wiped it out, you immediately lost the edge on the razor, and the next time you shaved, it was hell. So then we shifted over to a Braun mechanical wind-up razor. Tried that. Well, it would pull the roots out, the beard out by the roots. So Bill and I said, to heck with it. We're just going to let our beards go. Ed was the only one who really hung in there.
Well, I had a very stiff washcloth, and that's all I needed.
Did you get a bit fed up with the control monitoring you every second of your existence up there? Did that get on your nerves sometimes? Mm-hmm. You know, like Big Brother.
How long you got?
Well, we didn't feel like they were monitoring every move we made, but they set a schedule for us that we couldn't keep up with. And the reason was that if you made a mistake, you had to press on. You couldn't go back and fix it and do it right. You had to press on because the schedule was so tight. They even had it scheduled when we could go to the bathroom because they were managing the time so tightly. And that caused us a lot of trouble, a lot of anguish. as we, haste makes waste, and when you hurry, you make mistakes, and then you end up having to do the experiment over again at some other time. That had a definite effect on our morale, and halfway through the mission we got it to a place where we said we really have to find a different way to do business, because the way we're doing it right now is not being successful. Our morale is suffering because of that, and we need to find an answer. So I sent a message down on the medical channel to the people on the ground and told them we were having this trouble and that we thought we needed to talk about it. And I said we can either talk about it on the medical channel or on the open channel, whichever you want. Well, the press immediately got wind of that and said, you can't keep it secret. So we, in front of the whole world, we had what I used to call the world's first sensitivity session in space. We came in over Seattle and went out over northern part of Florida, Merritt Island. And during that 12 to 14 minutes, we poured our hearts out. I told them all the things that they were doing that were making us unhappy. They were scheduling exercise after a heavy meal and doing this and doing that. And we told them all the things they were doing that were making us unhappy and things we needed to change. Then we went around the Earth one more time, and this time we came in over the same track, only about 1,500 miles to the east. And they had the opportunity to tell us everything we were doing to make their life miserable. And we listened to that. And so then we went to bed, and the next morning we talked again with them on the ground shortly and got a few messages up on our little teletype machine in which they proposed a total change in the way the schedule would be done. From then on, they scheduled things only because they were trajectory implicit. That is, something that had to be done at a precise point in the trajectory, you just couldn't change that. But everything else that didn't need to be done at a precise time, such as housekeeping and cleanup and that sort of thing, was put on a shopping list. And each of us got our shopping list every morning. Well, that allowed us a lot more freedom of judgment, a lot more freedom of action, and it turned out that it made us far more productive. We made up all of the experiments that had not been completed, and we actually got a few extra ones done that were not even scheduled, things that we just made up. So it was a very classic example of the importance of remembering that people living up in space are just like the people down on the Earth. You can only work so fast for so long. The people on the Ford or the Vauxhall production lines can tell you just how fast that line can move. And if you move it any faster, things just go to hell. And if they go too slow, you don't get enough done. And it's the same thing in space. People can only work so fast for so long, and then they begin to break down or have problems, and things go badly. So we learned a lot about industrial engineering that we should have probably known before we ever left the Earth.
The carrot versus the stick.
Yes.
Yeah.
Jerry, that sounds a lot like stress management and health and safety there. But I was going to say, the 84 days, you were talking about air dispensing medicine. Did you all get things like headaches, stomach aches, and the normal sort of ailments we get on Earth?
Actually, we didn't really suffer too much. Bill Pogue felt a lot of pressure in his head, like he had a bad cold for he said he didn't really feel good to almost 2 months into the flight. But other than that, I don't think we had any real anything we have to worry about. I was always worried that Jerry Carr, who never had his appendix out and who was the commander who knew how to fly the spacecraft home, and we had never we've been a corpsman and a poor man's corpsman in a hospital, and we'd learned to extract teeth and sew things up, but I never learned how to take appendix out, especially in zero gravity. So I was just praying that Jerry was going to keep that appendix.
What did you've explained the launch, what that felt like, but what did the landing feel like when you actually hit the water? Is that a large impact? Did the capsule turn over?
Yes, it is. It's a bang when you get there. You're falling in the chutes at 15 feet per second with the 3 great big parachutes. And you're swinging this way, and of course the amount of swing that you do depends a lot on the winds. We were very fortunate the day we landed. There was very little wind. It was a calm sea, but we had swung just enough so that when we hit, our spacecraft flipped over nose down. And so we looked out the window and there was nothing but green water out there. And we were hanging from our straps. So we executed the procedure for flipping it over again, which was to activate two airbag compressors that filled airbags that it looked like a brassiere on the top of the spacecraft. And when they filled up, it changed the center of buoyancy, and the spacecraft rolled over on its back. And but the landing itself was what, 2.5 Gs, something like that?
Something like that. It was good, firm slap, but you felt firm, but you were laying on the couch, so you got supported. Your body was very uniformly supported, so there was no pain associated with it or any disability.
And seeing the flames coming around the window on re-entry was quite an impressive sight. We're going to have to quit in about 3 minutes here, so.
Could you describe what it was like when the launch escape system departed? You extracted itself away from the
Little Joe pulled away.
Yeah. Well, that was kind of a surprise, because we knew exactly when it was going to happen, and you know the shroud around the escape tower covers the windows. And so when the escape tower goes, it goes with a bang, and all of a sudden it's like somebody turns on a spotlight into your face. And it took a little while to get used to that all of that sudden light. But after that is when we began to see some of the things around the Earth and began to recognize a thing or two.
Joe, just quickly there, just to expand on what you were saying about re-entry there, was that a rough ride as well? You said about the flames coming past the capsule?
No, I don't remember it being too rough. It was very moderately rough, but there was this squashing feeling. And of course, having been weightless butterflies for 84 days, we had less tolerance to that sort of thing. We were all wearing girdle G-suits, and the girdles were pumped up full so that there was airbag pressure on through our lower abdomen, our thighs, and our calves. And that helped keep the blood pooled, at least in the upper part of our body. It wasn't so much the roughness as it was the tunneling down of the vision. I felt like my vision tunneled down to about that. And I had to move my head in order to see all of my instruments. It didn't last long.
It was a strange feeling when you first felt gravity after not feeling anything for 3 months or so. It felt to me like I was tumbling, but I couldn't discern a direction of tumbling. It's like you go out and you get very dizzy and you get the fluid in a semicircular canal spinning around, and you stop and the world's going around on you. I felt that way, but I didn't see any particular direction. It was the G-sensing apparatus in the inner ear was trying to figure out what the heck was going on here, or the brain was trying to figure out what to do with the signals.
Just a quick one. Would either of you like to fly again?
I would, but she won't let me. Thank you very much.